This is Billy.
This is Noelle.
And we are... I don't remember the name of our channel. I think it's Those Book People.
Yeah, Those Book People.
So hello from BookTube's newest stars.
We've already had a couple of shorts. You may have seen us in those.
I might delete them.
Oh, okay. Well,
I look really bad in them. All right, so we got to our names.
you can start.
Okay. Well, I'm a big old nerd. So I've always been kind of nerdy, and when I was a little kid, I loved to read. So I've always loved reading. I got into books, I guess, younger than most people. Not to sound snobby. I don't mean that in a snobby way. What I mean is that I liked reading, and I was a bookworm from like first grade on. I remember my teacher used to like tell my parents about books that I might like. I remember reading the Ramona series as a little kid, and then my teacher turned me on to Junie B Jones. I liked the Boxcar Children, but I'm probably talking too much now. So anyway, so I liked reading as a little kid, and then as I got into middle school age, and there was more like novels assigned to us and like dissecting of the novels, I did not enjoy that. And so from middle school through high school, I didn't really like reading anymore. There are a couple standout books that were assigned to me in high school that I enjoyed. I will probably do a separate video on that. But I didn't get into reading recreationally again until I was in college, which is kind of sad to think about. And now reading is a beloved hobby again, and there's more to say on that, but first, over to you, Billy.
Over to me. I always liked reading, but when I was really young, there isn't a lot that I can remember. I mean, obviously I had like Goosebump books. I remember getting books from like the school fair, and those would be my books to read. I do remember that my mom would take me to the library a decent amount, and honestly, I forgot about these until just now. I used to read... Well, I think there's two of them. I read the Doom books, D-O-O-M, not Dune, as a little kid. Doom, based on like the computer games, and I used to like those a lot. Otherwise, I didn't really get into reading until like middle school when my friend Brian gave me a bunch of books to read. The first one being The Hobbit, and then I don't remember the order of these. It was The Hobbit, it was a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons books from R.A. Salvatory, the Drist books. Homeland, Exile, and Sojourn were like the ones that really got me into books, but he also let me borrow Magic the Gathering books, so it was all fantasy for me at the beginning. I think it was the Masquerade cycle that I read, like 3 or 4 or 5 books back then. After that, I really would only read in the summer, so I liked fantasy a lot. And then after middle school, I didn't really have a lot of time to read books, so mostly I would read books in the summer. My parents always had a summer house, and I would bring books up to read during that time. That was when I read the Lord of the Rings after The Hobbit. I would read still mostly just fantasy. I would read the Lord of the Rings and more of the R.A. Salvatore books. And that was kind of all I read in middle school. In college, same type of thing. I really would just read during the summer. When like the show True Blood was big, I read a bunch of the Sookie Stackhouse novels. I think they're also called the Southern Vampire Mystery series. And I would just pick books that I would like to read and like kind of read them up until the end of the summer and then have no time to read. Yeah, other than until we started reading again within like maybe the last 6 months, I would maybe read 1 or 2 books a year just because I feel like I would always have better intentions for reading. Like, okay, we're going to go into bed and read, and I would read like 2 or 3 pages and be like, I'm way too tired, and have to close the book and like get nowhere in like this Stephen King book that I want to read. And he's very wordy, so you don't get far when you read like 4 chapters of him and then you just give up. So that's my story. I
guess that leads into, I don't know if I was supposed to mention this already. We like talked about our outline and plans for this video so much that I'm not up to speed. So for me, I got back into reading as an adult because I got a Kindle as a gift. And I was like, wow, this is really cool and also kind of expensive, so I need to make sure I use it. And that was what got me into reading again as an adult. And I would say when I got my Kindle, I was maybe like 19 or 20. So for I think like a few years at that point, I got back into reading again. And then I think I kind of stopped reading at some point, and then I took a job where I was commuting on the train, so I started reading while I was on the train, and that got me back into books again. But kind of like Billy said, like, it just wasn't always, once I stopped taking the train, there wasn't always time, and it's, you get involved in other things, and you still like reading, but it's not something you just always think to do. So more recently, over the last, I think, couple of years, we've been just so tired of, like, you finish your day, you eat dinner, and then you sit down on the couch, and you open up Netflix and Hulu and whatever other apps that you might be trying. We've tried Apple TV, we've tried Paramount Plus, but the point is we would spend so much time scrolling through all of the options and they all looked awful. And then finally, we kind of decided, this sounds weird, but maybe you can relate, we both have a lot of books, and there's also a lot of books on our Goodreads that we want to read, and we don't have time for it, and we're also sitting on the couch wasting time looking at terrible looking thumbnails on Netflix. Why don't we just cancel that and read? We do still watch shows. Yeah. We're not like totally snobby academic.
No.
Oh, I only read a book.
No, but I mean, like there's some nights that you just want to watch YouTube, but then you watch it for like 3 or 4 hours, and you're watching things that you're like, I don't know, you fall down like a rabbit hole, and you're watching like dog videos for some reason for an hour straight. You're like, I just wasted this whole hour. I could just be reading a book or something,
Yeah. So I think for us, canceling streaming kind of forced us. Because the way I started, and I think the way we both started looking at it is like, this is such a waste of our precious limited time. Like, first of all, we spend time scrolling and not even finding anything. And then secondly, we will find shows and watch them and hate them. And watch them just because it's something to do and something to entertain us. And it's like, at least when you read a book, you're like engaging your mind a little bit more. You engage your mind when you're watching something, but it's different. You get more out of reading a book. You learn new words. It's cozy. This is like totally a tangent, but like we have fun colored lights in the living room. We make it all like cozy and vibey in here. And like sometimes we put on rain sounds, and it's more relaxing. And when you have a long list of books that you want to make your way through, you're not going to if you're not reading. So
yeah, I've had a stacks of books for years that I've bought myself or gotten for gifts, and then they just sit there because I can only read 1 or 2 a year, and then I keep getting more, and it's like I have them because I want to read them, so we might as well just do it. And it's also funny, like canceling like the streaming services, it also had like another effect where now we're buying movies and TV shows, so we have them, because it's not like we stopped watching TV completely.
No.
But it's just, you want to watch one specific movie or one show, and it moves from Hulu to Netflix, which you've canceled, or to whatever, and it's like, why are we're paying like all this money to every month for like 4 services? Now we'll just have the movies and TV shows we want to watch, we can watch them. Now we have all our books we can just get through too.
I think we're being more selective about how we spend our money, and also more picky about how we spend our time.
Yeah.
And no regrets.
It's funny thinking about this. I would say, obviously, for me, it's fantasy, which I know she doesn't really care about at all, or generally dislikes, I would say.
When I was a child, I think I was in 2nd grade, my mom and I read the first Harry Potter book together. This was before the first movie came out, so I think I was in 2nd grade. We read the first Harry Potter book together, like, every night. I don't know how long that took, but I think it took a long time. Then the movie came out, we saw the movie, then we started the second one, and I think we both lost interest.
My God, you had so many more to read.
I know, but I don't know. We just like fell off, and then I think that might be the last time I read with one of my parents. I don't know. That's kind of sad to think about, but I think that's. Oh, you know what? That's not the last time I read fantasy. In 5th grade, I had a really cool teacher. Actually, she was all about reading. I think she was using her own money, but she made her own classroom library, and. Her thing was like, you need to like always have a book. Like, as her students, it was like, you're always going to be reading, but you get to pick it, and if you don't like the book you picked, then stop reading it and find another book. Like, it was so cool. I loved being in her class. And when I started 5th grade, I actually thought I loved fantasy, and I read like I don't know, like 4 or 5 of them. And then one day, when you're in 5th grade, you're kind of like at that very beginning of like becoming a snobby teenager. And so at one point I just went, oh my God, fantasy is so stupid. And since then I've never wanted to read it. But I like fairy tales, which is weird. I don't know. I'm reading Alice in Wonderland, or Alice's Adventures in Wonderland right now. So it's not that I need everything to be like that could only happen in real life. I'm just not into world building, I guess. And and I don't like series.
Yeah, which is, once again, the opposite of me, because I love series. I would always consider myself like a fantasy fan, but it was funny. I guess it was last spring. We went to a garage sale. We wanted to find like books or something cool. We went to a few garage sales. Do you remember that? And I found this guy selling a bunch of fantasy and sci-fi. And
The book was over here.
Yeah, I think I moved it. He asked me what kind of fantasy I was into, and I'm like, I haven't read fantasy since like middle school, really. Maybe high school. I wound up getting Brandon Sanderson. I think it's The Way of Kings, the first book of that series. But I love fantasy. I kind of like all genres almost. Like fantasy, I could read sci-fi. I considered for a long time The Lord of the Rings was my favorite, and then in college I actually read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. And I loved it. I watched Blade Runner and I didn't like it because it was so different. And then a few years ago, I actually tried to reread that and I like dropped it halfway. I don't know. I need to give it another shot. It's weird when you read something that you thought was your favorite book and then you're like, this seems okay. It doesn't seem that mind-blowing like it did the first time I read it. But I don't know. I like, in college when I had time, I read a lot of like nonfiction essays and memoirs, like Chuck Klosterman and David Sedaris. I read garbage like Do They Serve, what was it?
I hope they serve beer in hell.
Like Tucker Max, like books that like all of my friends read. I read a little bit, like I read the Sookie Stackhouse novels back then. That was because True Blood was huge. What else? What was the question? What do I like to read? So now it's like everything. It's fantasy, sci-fi. I would just say I like fiction, but I'm interested in certain nonfiction too. I have a few books on like birds that I've been reading. I started reading and I want to read. And I feel like there's more nonfiction that I have, but I have like a book on Games Workshop. I'm also a big nerd, like miniatures and Warhammer. It's like the history of that. That's really cool. I'm halfway through that. I'm getting into fantasy and sci-fi again now. That's kind of what I want to mainly read for a while. But like, I also read Cormac McCarthy. I read No Country for Old Men, and I loved that. So I'm kind of open to anything.
I'm not that open-minded, but I do like several things. I will say, so when I was in college and I got back into reading again, I was really into, I guess, like memoirs. I remember in high school at one point, and I will say, like, I didn't read a lot recreationally in high school, so I think a couple times I took out books from the library. But I read The Heroine Diaries by Nikki Sixx, which is like his memoir. I have the 10-year anniversary edition, because when that came out, I was like, I need to own this, because that book was amazing. And I was so young when I read it the first time. It's like crazy. You know, like I'm a sheltered kid from the suburbs, and I'm reading this book about hardcore drugs.
From a rock star. Nikki Sixx is from Motley Crue.
Everyone knows that.
I don't know about that.
But it just opened my eyes up to like different types of books, because when you're a kid, I think that you think that there's Harry Potter, and then there's like, you know, your fiction books, and maybe like, you know, about like crappy romance books. And then you think that like nonfiction is just like books that you take out of the library to go write an essay. Like, At least that was my impression of nonfiction. And stumbling upon the like interesting person memoir genre, that stuck with me. So by the time I got to college and I got my Kindle and I got into reading again, that was a lot of the books that I started reading. I remember I read Running with Scissors, which I had just heard the title. Like, when that book originally came out, I was too young. I was probably like 10 years old. But I had heard the title and I knew it, you know, I'd heard of it and I was curious. I still don't really know why that guy has a book. Maybe just because he had such a weird upbringing. But that's just a memoir. If you've read it, you know, it's a famous book and it's also a movie. It's a crazy story and it was really interesting and really engaging. But I was also going through a phase at that time where I kind of felt like fiction is so silly and such a waste of time because it's just made up crap. Like, I want to read about something that really happened. So I really only read memoirs, and mostly like celebrity and like musician memoirs for a while. And then I kind of shifted away from that at some point. And I remember I took out from the library, it's by Jeffrey Dever, I don't know how to say his name.
Is it the detective, or?
No, he's an author. Oh. But the book is called The Bodies Left Behind, and it's like a thriller, and it's the first like mystery book for adults that I ever read, and I was like, oh my god, this is so good. And then, you know, throughout my 20s, like I read a lot of books like that, like psychological thrillers, not so much like murder mystery, but more like thriller, like, oh my god, what's happening? Until I got to the point where I felt like they're all very formulaic and predictable and I never want to read another one again. Like, I read too much of the same genre. So more recently, I've gotten into, you know, I still like a good memoir and I still will read fiction if it sounds good, but I'm open to, I don't know, just things that I never would have thought of reading in the past. I really like reading about psychology. I've gotten into a weird interest in like mental illness. I just read a book about psychopaths, and I have several other books about psychopaths on my list that I'd like to get to. I have some books about schizophrenia. Sounds so weird. I don't know, but I really like nonfiction now, and I like books that are, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, like eye-opening. As far as fiction, like I want to make my way to Kurt Vonnegut and to Ray Bradbury, and I want to read about. Like, I read 1984 in college, and I liked it at the time, but now I haven't read it again since, but I think about it all the time. And I'm like, that is such a good book. It's such, like, it's fiction with a purpose and a message, and I want to read more books like that.
And you surprised me because you read some sci-fi, which I didn't think you were going to read recently.
I don't think I've read sci-fi recently, but I'm open to it.
Oh.
But with again, though, like, I'm not into just, like, let's read nerdy sci-fi. Not that, you know, whatever. Do that if you want. It's not for me. I'm into the stuff that's more, like a metaphor for, like, the corruption in society, I guess. You know, like, if I can read your book and understand the message that you're not just telling a story, which is fun, you know, at times, but, like, also you're making a comment on the corruption in our world, you know, that will never go away. Man's inhumanity to man. I think that's interesting. I appreciate that more now. Whereas when I was a kid, I don't think I had an appreciation for it because I still didn't see what the real world was like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did say you want to read Vonnegut, and I guess, I don't know, I guess I consider him sci-fi.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like he has like alternate histories, and I mean, he has a character, Kilgore Trout, who is in a lot of his books. I've read Slaughterhouse-Five, and I think I may have read another one.
We started listening to that audiobook
a
few summers ago. We didn't finish it.
Yeah, I think it was James Franco was reading it.
Yes. But it was good. It was enjoyable. We just stopped listening.
Yeah, you really have to pay attention. It's like we used to like listen to books while we like played like games, right? Like Crash Team Racing, and sometimes when we do puzzles, but it was just it required too much concentration. Book. Like I think we've enjoyed a lot of David Sedaris and like things that are funny, like memoirs. Like we listened to like, was it
Born Standing Up by Steve Martin?
I actually didn't like that much.
I didn't love it.
We listened to like Audrey Plaza's book, or
no, I don't think she has one. We listened to Anna Kendrick's
book. That's right. So
well, with audiobooks, I mean, we're going on such a tangent
we're going
now,
on a tangent.
But I think when we're together listening to an audiobook and when I'm alone listening to an audiobook, we both kind of prefer to pick ones that are not, you can afford to miss a word here and there.
Yeah. So when we started reading again more recently, I read a few different books, and that's really what got me into wanting to read all the time right now. One of them was All You Need Is Kill. This is the book that the movie Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise is based on. There's also a manga, but this is way better. That I had also been listening to a bunch of tabletop role-playing like performances for Call of Cthulhu, which is based on Lovecraft's works, and a lot of that is like detective noir, and I really wanted to read a good detective story, so I read Agatha Christie, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, because that was highly recommended, and I didn't really like it that much. I figured out the twist very early, and it didn't really like satisfy that urge to read a good detective novel. So I wound up reading the first book of the Dresden Files, and I loved it. And that was a book that I read within maybe a few sittings, which I have not done in years. And I'm very excited to get back into that. I took a break because I started a book called The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. It's a series of, well, at least 4 books, which I'm almost through, and is an extremely difficult and slow read, but I'm really enjoying it, and I just now want to read a bunch of fantasy books and some sci-fi. So I'm going to have an upcoming video about that because I have a couple more chapters to go and I'll be done with that. And I want to talk about it because there's not a lot of people talking about Gene Wolfe on BookTube, which I find is strange. I feel like a lot of, even like some of these booktubers, we're booktubers now.
We're booktubers
Some
now.
booktubers do fantasy, but they seem to only read like popular, newer releases, I guess. And Gene Wolfe wrote these books, I believe, in the 80s. And, I don't really find a lot of people talking about them. And it's like, I think it's my favorite book / series now. And I'm not even grasping all of it. I want to reread it.
I've noticed I don't watch a ton of BookTube because I've tried watching some videos and I don't have the same taste as a lot of these other creators, but they don't really seem to talk about older titles,
right?
Which makes sense because no one, I don't know, it's like,
yeah,
it seems random, I guess, to pick a random book from the 80s and talk about it, but that's actually how I like to read older books. I'm not always interested in the new releases.
Right,
so.
and I'm not every booktuber. I don't watch a ton of booktube, but for years I've been watching Murphy Napier and Daniel Green, and I would like to watch more of Philip Chase, but I haven't read a lot of the books that he's read, so it's like you find someone that likes the stuff you like, but you don't want to get spoiled, or sometimes you just want to go into a book blind, but...
Yes.
But I feel like all of them have never spoken about the Book of the New Sun. So, and I have a list of books that I want to read that I haven't really seen many people talk about. So that's why we're doing this. That's part of the fun.
Yeah. So for my books that I already know I want to do videos on, I recently read The Radium Girls. If I had prepared better, it's in my office, but like I'm comfortable. I'm not getting up. So I will edit that here. It was so good. It was so eye-opening. I will say the writing wasn't my definition of the best, but the author is also British and they have a different writing structure than we have here, and I've become more sensitive to that as I've read more British authors. But you don't read it for the writing. I will say it's a nonfiction book that mostly reads like a novel. There are so many, if you can call them characters, except they're real people. So it gets a little tricky to keep them all straight, and I should really stop describing it now because the whole point is that I'll do a separate video on it. But it is a book that I think about every few days almost, or week. Like, it's just such a crazy story, so I really want to talk about that in a video. I also read Life After Life back in the end of last year, so a couple months ago. That was a really good novel. I really liked that. I'm reading Alice in Wonderland. No, I'm not. I'm reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. We both are right now. And I don't know why. I always wanted to read that book and only just got around to it now. So that was stupid. But we'll probably do a video on that because I love the movie, the cartoon movie, not the weird Johnny Depp movie.
I've had a copy of that book for like 15 years and only... Well, actually, no, I'm lying. I did read about half of it back when I bought it, and then whatever reason I dropped it. But we're reading through it now.
And there's probably a ton more books. There's books I haven't read yet that I imagine I'd like to do videos on, but I haven't read them yet, so I'm not going to say it yet. And obviously, this channel is here to stay, so we will keep doing book videos, but if any of those titles sound interesting to you, then definitely please subscribe because we will be talking about them. And tell us in the comments also, of the titles that we mentioned, which ones do you want to see videos on first? Because we can prioritize based on what's the most popular, if anybody is watching. I think that was it for our outline. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, thanks for watching our video.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to have a lot more, so subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe.